First of all, let me see a show of hands here. Who here in the audience knew about licorice pizza coming in and what licorice pizza means? Not a lot of Californians here. Paul, what, you want to tell us what?
Well, it's a record store. It's a regional record store in Southern California that instantly takes me back to my childhood at this time. But licorice pizza comes from an Abbott and Costello gag because they made a record and it was terrible, and there's just a throwaway bit. They said, well, we could always sell them as licorice pizzas, the shape of a pizza, licorice pizza. So that kind of became a sort of turn of phrase for an LP, But why name a movie like that? Well, I don't know why. At a certain point, it just sort of like running out of any other good ideas, and you just sort of you run out of runway, and we sort of I leaned into. This reminds me of my youth.
Yeah, and it's a really vivid recreation of that time, not just L.A. and not just the 70s, which you've done. Mm-hmm. In movies like Inherent Vice and Boogie Nights, but it's also the Valley specifically, right? So I'm curious, just what are some of the elements of your boyhood specifically that you wanted to recreate for this film that you remember?
As much as I could. I mean, I had a story that wasn't exactly mine, but it paralleled mine. My relationship to Gary Getzman. Who, I don't know if any of you know, is a producer. He worked with Jonathan Demme for many, many years, and he was in a Lucille Ball film, Yours, Mine, Ours. When that didn't really work out, he started a waterbed business. And then when that didn't work out, he started a pinball palace. And he had one scheme after another. Ended up making movies with Jonathan Demme. So to hear his stories took me back to his gang of friends. I mean, he just sort of substitute a movie camera with a waterbed or a pinball palace, and I was probably an extension of Gary. I didn't exactly have that kind of charisma. I didn't exactly have that kind of way with words that he does. No one does in terms of the real Gary Getzman. I mean, he's one of a kind. But the stories he told was an opportunity to enter into a world that I remember very well that seemed impossible to ignore. And having many children and teenage children, the opportunity to recreate and show them the world that I grew up in. I mean, the Valley hasn't changed that much, so you don't have to do that much to it to kind of take a ride in a time machine. There's empty storefronts around, fill them with pinball machines, put some kids around, and suddenly you're back in time.
It is a time machine. And these characters that you guys play, I guess they would be like your older cousins, maybe. Age-wise.
Well, right, yeah, or my older siblings, actually, yeah, for sure. The story takes place in about 73. I was 3 years old, but my memories sort of begin in the gas crisis of 78. I remember that. I remember being in line with my mom in the station wagon, and it felt like the end of the world. In that moment, it wasn't, but it felt like it, so I could recreating that and sending him down the line there and having him. We did it a bunch of times, and I sort of suggested to Cooper, I said, it's got to feel like the end of the world to you, and sort of did it and felt like that. Like the kind of character who'd be happy to just go down in flames running along with his brother and enjoying the apocalypse somehow.
So what did it feel for you two to be in this sort of vividly recreated 1973?
It was great. Yeah, I loved it. Well, we also shot during COVID, so there wasn't a lot of room for seeing anyone, really, except for the people that you were seeing every day on set. And so it made for kind of the best experience because you were never taken out of it. And where I was staying was also very 70s, and I felt like I couldn't escape it, and I didn't want to.
Also, Cooper didn't have his license, so I actually did have to drive him around.
Yes, Alana actually did have to drive me everywhere.
I'm curious, Alana, I know that you and Paul have collaborated on several videos with your band, Haim, but how did you guys connect at first?
Me and Paul kind of connected in a very crazy way. I mean, I feel like all three of us kind of all crashed into each other, but with Paul, my mother moved to Los Angeles when she was in her early 20s. And her first job in LA was to work at a school called Buckley as the art teacher. And one of her favorite students was Mr. Paul Thomas Anderson, as, I don't know, how old were you when my mom taught you?
I was like between the ages of 6 and 8.
Yeah.
The painting, I've just...
Well, you're ruining the punchline, but that's okay.
I've blown the punchline. I was about 6 or 7 or 8 years old when her mom taught me in that time.
But my mom obviously had not met my father yet, so she was Miss Rose. And we kind of heard the amazing stories that my mom would tell us about Paul, but we would never believe that she actually taught him. I thought that my mom was lying constantly. And finally, it came a time where Paul had seen in our liner notes on our record that we had a mutual friend named Asa, and contacted Asa, gave Asa his email, and then Asa connected us by saying, this is Paul Thomas Anderson's email him, he wants to talk to you about something. And me and my siblings, I think, did 30 million pacing rounds around our house. Like, what do you say? Do you say hi? Do you say hey? Do you say, hey, it's Esty, Danielle, and Alana? Do you say, hey, we're the band Haim? Does he even know if this is even going to get to the right person? Is this actually PTA? And we wrote, I think, like a 3-page letter to him, and we got invited to his house. And while we were driving to Paul's house, we all kind of made the collective decision, don't tell Paul that mom taught him, because what if he hated mom? That would be terrible. And then we would step in, tell him, and then the dinner would be over. And so we were all, we're not going to say anything, we're not going to say anything. Maybe if it comes up, maybe we'll say something, I don't know. And my sister Esty walked through the door, and the first thing she said was, hi, my name is Esty Haim. My mom taught you. She was your art teacher at the Buckley School. And Paul told us to wait a minute. He was like, we said we're Miss Rose's children. And he said, wait 1 second, went to his son's bedroom, got this painting of the Mountain of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and said, I painted this with your mother, and I kept it all these years. And that was the beginning of an incredible friendship, a friendship that changed my life forever. And now I'm here.
And you saved it and had that painting handy too, which in and of itself is kind of...
Not only did I save it, I mean, it meant a lot to me. I mean, she's underselling the impression that her mother made on me as a young man. I mean, I remembered her for years. I would think about her always, moving from place to place, home to home. I held on to these paintings. There's another one that's at my mom's house, but and I held on to it through years. I put it in my son's room. And when I first saw Alana and her sisters, I had this instant connection to them that was unplaceable. It was beyond it that I enjoyed their music, or they were from the same place that I was. There was something else that I couldn't quite put my finger on. So when she did say that, it made perfect sense. And by the way, she looks exactly like her mom. So I'm
now,
sort of fulfilling my childhood love for Donna Rose.
Donna Rose.
Now you've written this role for her specifically. I'm curious, did you get to drive a truck backwards down a hill?
I did drive the truck backwards down a hill, yes.
And is that a skill you brought to the set beforehand?
100%. I've been training for this day my whole life. No, I had no idea how to drive, not even a truck, just stick shift in general. I had no idea, and Paul graciously got me lessons, but it's a known thing in my family that I'm the worst driver of my family, and I did not want to tell him that, so I didn't. And really, I met this beautiful 70s U-Haul truck, and at first, our relationship started off pretty rocky. I think the first time I turned the car on and tried to move it, I stalled and the camera almost fell off. And I remember looking at Paul and being like, oh my God, he's never gonna, I'm fired. I'm totally fired. But I kept going. I fell in love with this truck, honestly, but I missed the truck. I missed driving that truck. It was a beautiful truck. And if you ever need me to move your house, I can do it for you if you would like.
Backwards.
Cooper,
you obviously have a long backstory with Paul. Have you acted before?
No, I have not acted. The only acting I've ever done is with Paul, but it was on a very lower scale with an iPhone and his kid, and I would always play the bad guy, and his kid would beat me up, and it was good fun. But no, I've never acted on this kind of scale before.
I mean, the performance you give is just so exuberant. There's something that's so intoxicating about watching Gary, and he's so confident all the time. How do you screw your charm up to that place, take after take. He's always operating.
He is always operating. He definitely is. I would like to say that I'm good with people, and I actually find that I can talk to a lot of people, and I don't really get that nervous around them. I think the thing that Gary has that I don't is a confidence. This immense amount of confidence in himself to talk to anybody, talk to Alana, and in the line, and that's the thing that I didn't have, that I would never do that. And that's what I had to get to, and that's what he had.
You know, it's meaningful for all of us, I think, as fans of your work, Paul, to see you, Cooper, in this role, and we think about your dad and the movies he made with Paul. So I do wonder, was that legacy front in your mind, or something that you had to think about or not think about?
You're never not thinking about it, but we had work to do, and we had a film to make, and this is the relationship that we're going to have, and we had a mission to accomplish. So we would hope that whatever experiences, whatever relationships we've had, the sort of spirits that help us and guide us and push us into good things was around us all the time, looking over us and pushing us along. You'd hope for that, for sure. And I imagine that happened. It felt like that. But we're so busy learning our lines and trying to get through a day's work. You know, you making a film is great that way, because you are immersed in that mission and that mission only, and there's no time for anything but getting them connected and getting on with the day's work. So maybe then collapse and you kind of look back at it and wonder what the hell just happened.
I think to get to that place where you're both connecting, you really create this beautiful recreation of the period, and that really helps. And something that knocked me out personally was seeing Tale of the Cock again. Mm-hmm. And that's a real restaurant, by the way,
I don't know if
in
anybody
Studio
knows
City,
it, yeah.
with the stained glass and the red carpeting and everything. So talk to me about your memories of that.
The Tail of the Cock was a great restaurant. For anybody that knows, there was two of them. There was one on La Cienega, right? The prime rib and the Yorkshire pudding, martinis, all of that. Johnny Guarinari was a great piano player, Strad piano player, would play there every Wednesday night. The one at Coldwater in Ventura, which is a very special location, that you would get dressed up and you would go for birthday parties, Mother's Day, like special occasions. The kids would be allowed to go. But it was a kind of very convenient place for movie stars on their way home that weren't ready to go home yet. You know, maybe they had a job at Universal or Warner Brothers that day. Let's say they probably live in Beverly Hills. You're going to come and you're going to go over Coldwater Canyon. And right before you get into Coldwater Canyon, you think, well, I'm just going to pull in a Tail of the Cock for maybe a couple martinis. And not to mention you sort of movie stars, but Hanna-Barbera was nearby, so there was a lot of Hanna-Barbera animators, so you'd see all these guys in their white shirts, black ties. And voiceover guys. My father was in voiceovers, so there was an incredible kind of atmosphere. It was like kind of a little bit like a commissary in a way, and a watering hole. My experiences there, they're deep, and there's a huge memory. No, it's no longer there, unfortunately. The sequence in the film is also based on, there's a restaurant called the Ram's Horn, which was in Encino, and it was famous for a few different reasons. One of the reasons was that Sonny and Cher used to go there because they lived up the hill, and Sonny and Cher would be spotted at the Ram's Horn. The other was, there was a local newscaster named Jerry Dunphy, very famous. He used to say, from the desert to the sea to all of Southern California, a good evening. And Jerry Dunphy would do we would be in the bar at 4:30. He would leave. He would go to Channel 9. He would do his broadcast. He would come back. His drink was still there. He'd finish a couple more drinks. It was like Ron Burgundy, you know. And then he would get, you know, have a few more. And then he would go back and do the 9 o'clock news on Channel 9. And he'd come back, and that was his spot. But it was really famous amongst my friends because Evel Knievel came in one night and had a few. And of course, like, the sort of locals were egging him on, like, do a stunt. And the Valley legend was, I saw Evel Knievel jump 3 cars in the parking lot of the Ram's Horn one night, you know. And then somebody said, I was there, and I saw him crash into a parked car and wipe out and then say, screw it, and go back in and get drunk. So that story had always stuck with me, never quite sure which one was true or not, and sort of used it and brought it over into this this episode that Alana has with Sean Penn and Tom Waits. Those kinds of characters were always around the Tail of the Cock. That was a kind of, not every night, but couple nights a week, that was the kind of stuff that ended up happening at those types of places.
I'm assuming that Jack Holden is a little like William Holden.
Yes, he's a stand-in for William Holden. In The Rainbow, the film she's auditioning for is sort of loosely based on a film called Breezy. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it, but Clint Eastwood directed it with Kay Lenz and William Holden. It's a lot of the dialogue we appropriated from Breezy. We call her Rainbow.
So it's loaded with your memories and Gary's real stories
Yes.
and memories and stuff. Another thing, though, about your process that I've always loved is just the way you choose music for your films. There's so many classic needle drops in so many of your films, and this one too. So I'm a little curious. Do you keep like a running list of pieces of music or songs in like a file somewhere on your phone or whatever? Do you write to music? What's your process?
Well, I think for a film in this era, it's been well covered ground, and a lot of songs have been used many different times. So you're trying to be honest to the period and honest to what might have been on the radio. You're also trying to uncover some songs perhaps that you've never heard before, but hopefully songs that can push the story along or will work gently pushing you through it. Maybe a little bit of support, or maybe you want it to be front and center and really kind of help the film achieve liftoff. So yeah, I have a running list of songs that I think might work. You sort of got the radio on all the time. You're sort of hungry for something to emerge that you've never heard of before. You can get the Billboard 100 year by year. You can get that list and print it out and sort of comb through it and see what was popular in a certain month and try to tailor it that way. And luckily, that can be very lucky. You sort of imagine, I've got a scene, this is probably about May 73. What was on the radio? This is radio and car culture particularly at that time. But ultimately, you're just using a basic barometer of, does this feel right? Does it work in the scene? And is it helping to achieve forward momentum in the story? I mean, it kind of becomes that simple. And sometimes you cheat. Sometimes you lie and cheat. You use a song from 1975 and you stick it in and you hope no one will notice. And other times it's also nice too. We sort of you can make the mistake that you kind of forget that there was music before 1973. You have to always remember and bring that stuff in, which I think feels good. Feels great hearing Bing Crosby come on and sing with the Andrews Sisters. That was nice. And to hear Nina Simone sing as well, that's a lovely way to start the film. I didn't really know that song that well, and it came on the radio, and I thought, oh, I'm stealing that one. That's great. That's going to be a great way to start the film.
Meanwhile, did Paul give you two any tapes, CDs, or playlists, or movies to watch? Any kind of references for you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I feel like we watched every Partridge Family episode we could, every episode of MASH. Me and Cooper made our own playlist that we would listen to every morning, every time we were getting ready to go on set. A lot of Band of Gold, Frida Payne was my favorite. Anything that could get us ready for the day. I mean, I love the 70s. I've always loved that era. So it was easy for me. I think it was me and Cooper kind of discovering our own tracks that we loved, and it was great.
Yeah, Paul made me a playlist, and I think I sent it to you, and it was for me and like all of the boys that I hang out with. I was supposed to send it to all of them, and of course it's on my iPhone, so it's not very 70s, but the music was 70s. And he also sent me, and I don't want to butcher the name, and I feel like I might, KPPC, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, good. Which was a radio station, and he would send me like the hour-long...
The broadcast.
Yeah. And thank you. And I would just have them constantly playing. Whenever I was making breakfast or whenever, like, I would fall asleep to them. And I'd just have it constantly playing in the background. And that was kind of just something for it to constantly feel like I was in the time period.
It was fun watching them both try to figure out how to use a rotary phone. That was really...
Yeah, this thing with a cord that attaches to the wall.
That thing,
More
yeah.
Cooper. Okay, more Cooper.
Explaining that you put your finger into the hole and you turn the dial and then you remove your finger. It was great fun to watch. And then there was a moment when Alana said, "So does this have star 69 back?" And I said, No star 69.
I can't believe you remember that. I can't believe you remember that.
I was thinking that too during that scene.
Oh, she's got his phone number. She called it
Of
back.
course.
But no,
I can hear his breathing.
No, the star 69 came in the 80s. But it was nice. Besides that, they were very in character and very in the period.
And Paul, are there certain movies that helped you get into the mood of this film?
Yeah, for sure.
Romantic comedies?
The touchstone, it was American Graffiti. In terms of its looseness, it's very, very loose, but it's also incredibly tight. It's what I mean by that is about 97 minutes long, and while it might feel like it's meandering, it's not. It's cut like a fine gem. You know, those performances in those films too, you know, seeing all those great actors now, from Paul Le Mat to Richard Dreyfuss and Ron Howard, Cindy Williams, Candy Clark, I mean, that is like an incredible cast. So that would be a watermark that you look to if you're sort of making a pure, you know, that movie's about the early 60s, still came out around this time. Fast Times at Ridgemont High was another one. I mean, that's a film for me that I was the age of these characters when it came out. So for me to kind of remember what that did to me, you know, it's seeing film about youth. Listen, it's on a constant rotation around my house is Billy Wilder, but this felt like you could kind of get some of that DNA of what he did. He was very, obviously incredibly light on his feet. He was the master of all of it, really. But he was trying to steal that skill that he had where he didn't have to put a hat on top of a hat. If a film had weight, it bared weight through the people and the humor and the story. It didn't need anything else to announce itself. He really trusted the performers and the story to be enough. That was a great, you kind of going back to some of his stuff, particularly The Apartment, was a good, like, don't forget to try and bring your Billy Wilder hat from time to time each day, because that it can serve you well.
It definitely has that warmth. There is something that's very romantic about this, and you've done romantic films. I think about Punch Drunk Love, but after something like Phantom Thread, which I thought was very romantic, this has a different feeling and a different vibe, and I wanted to put it to you, Paul. Do you think you're entering maybe a more reflective point in your career, 25 years in?
No, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I did not imagine when I finished Phantom Thread that I would make this film next. This came like a very generous drop into my lap, and that was irresistible and felt important to pursue. Don't worry, I can still be cranky and you know. But I had a friend one time named Tom Sherrick who was a great man who was in distribution. I can't remember what film he saw. Maybe it was The Master, and he said, you know, you're really, really good at this. You know, you're incredible at doing it, but you should make one every once in a while that people actually understand. And I remember putting this together. I thought, you know, he's not with us anymore. But I remember, this is for you, Tom. You know.
Understood. Let's thank our guests.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.